Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone. We are beginning the third panel. We have been hearing testimony from people in the border, people, the crisis that the migrants are living, and the problems of the Haitian population. In the second panel, we talked about the problems with Biden's proposals for migration and the difficulties that people uh, who are in migration are facing when they come to the United States and they are denied um, their rights. These are people who have been forced to leave their territories. We're going to start the third panel, which we have called the Defense of Territories and the fight against defending the territory against the extractivist neoliberal model promoted by the United States. I want to welcome Karen and Miriam. I'm going to ask Miriam Miranda to speak with us first. Miriam, it's a pleasure to have you today and to share the problems of the Honduran community in relation to the human rights after uh, the coup in which the School of the American Trained Soldiers participated. Welcome, Miriam. Thank you very much. Greetings. And thanks to SOA Watch for inviting us to participate and to speak at this very special time in Honduras. Also, greetings to Karen. We have a lot in common, both countries, especially on the coast, the Atlantic coast, and those of us who live on the coast in Honduras. Your organization has been working very much uh, about what these problems are with Latin America. There is something that I always say is that years ago, Honduras became a political laboratory to test institutionality, to create a failed state like we have here in Honduras, a failed state, a narco government, and all of this with the approval of the United States, because we recall that Honduras has had three coups. 2009, of course, there was one. 2012, the Supreme Court of Justice, and 2017, which was the electoral coup, which our voting rights were stolen, and the decisions of the Honduran people when we were imposed, um, Juan Orlando and Ms. Fulton, who was not what we say the ambassador, because after 2009 um, coup, there was a determination by the United States to have they decided not to have an ambassador or person, but they were interfering in the country. But there was Miss Fulton who proved the situation, which has generated multiple crises in this country. This was very disappointing, right? Because it was the final stroke when it was approved and they gave approval to this uh, government, and it is a drug government, And it's contradictory because the brother of Juan, uh, Hernandez has been given a lifetime sentence for dealing in drugs in the United States. So how is it possible that they continue to protect and to believe in a government that is so connected to the drug trade at the highest levels? This is a situation that we're living in this country. Also, let's not forget that Honduras, in the last decade, the last few years, we have had a humanitarian crisis generated, and that's what I consider this caravans, that we can see that it is quote unquote normal to have 5,000 people in a caravan leaving a country. We'll have the right to migrate, of course, but we also have the right to stay, the right to create a different kind of country, something for future generations. I want to celebrate right now and to send out a hug to our sisters, our companions from the Garifuna people in the United States who have today been into Washington commemorating and celebrating a political act, a cultural act, the award that has been presented to them by the political institution because of the struggle of OFRANEH. OFRANEH is a organization of the Garifuna people who have been fighting for the rights of people. But we must emphasize that in a country like this, where there is no institutionality, where it is a failed state, we have to fight for the rights of everyone, for all the sectors, all the uh, communities. I have been fighting for the rights of the women. We had a event in one of the territories that we are defending, what we call liberated territories from organized crime. We had more than 1,500 women in 2019, 10 years after the coup, where women who participated from 16 states, and they were all convinced as well that this is a country that we all have to unite. We have to rebuild every section and every organization in all of the countries, all of the counties in this country. I know SOA Watch supports us a lot, but I want to emphasize the problem with militarization and how our territories have been militarized and how they continue to be, not just in the case of Honduras, about what has been called fighting against drugs, the drug war. They are militarizing the territories and they are displacing communities. This is very grave. There's a colonization, the same practice that they have been doing in Colombia for a long time now, a 30-year-old drug war, which has been very clear that it does not function because this is the policy of the United States, calling it a fight against uh, narco traffickers, but it's also hurting the people. We have villagers who have been attacked, military attacks twice. They have been attacked from airplanes. And I think it's a very dangerous, a very grave situation. We have been denouncing this intervention from the United States, but also I feel that there is a very grave situation because every day, because of disputes, because they're disputing national resources and the problem with the climate problems, and there was no results from COP26 because it's always the United States and China say no to limiting their carbon output, and they're the biggest, the most powerful countries, and we have to concentrate and talk about how we can do our work at the community level, also at the national and global level, because this is a crisis. It is a crisis with no, like none other. None of us, none organization that we have will have no meaning unless we are working with the idea or the problem of climate change. It's impossible for us to continue doing analyzing the problem. The problem that we had with COVID-19 is very related to the climate problems, because the companies, the corporations continue to take over our countries, figure out how we're going to live, how we're going to eat, and taking over all of the natural resources of the planet. We have a huge challenge here, and I think it's important that from our spaces to create a analysis, a discussion, a proposal that would be, let's say, whole, because this is a situation that we are analyzing. I will end with this first um, sketch, saying that in the last 4 years, OFRANEH, we have lost more than 50 leaders, Garifunas, men and women, members of the Garifuna population have been assassinated. We've lost a lot of people. There are people who been have had orders of capture. In the last 15 years, 50 years, we have not had this kind of um, forced disappearance, except for, say, Mexico. Uh, we have not had this problem that we had last year in 2020. The number of people disappeared, 4 young people, amongst them a very important leader. There was a sentence against Honduras for violating the ancestral rights of the Garifuna people. Mr. Centeno, along with 3 other members that were disappeared, the state is responsible. The state does not want to work with the independent investigation unit, which we have in Pulse, we have asked for. The state does not want to answer where our brothers and sisters are, the reason that they were taken, and they also do not want to take to follow the orders that have been given by the Inter-American Court. And this is a permanent struggle that we do as a community. We exist. We will not exist unless we struggle against imperialism, uh, because every day it creates fear. They keep defining the future of our people from outside. And we have a political country, a political class that does not think about the people. They just think about the based on the orders that come from outside of the state. And right now we have a big challenge. Right now we have in Honduras an electoral process which has a number of crises with that. We believe that the resistance, the community struggles of the community, they are the ones that can guarantee our future of our communities, of our people. This is the work that we have been doing. I am convinced that our children, the future generation, really deserves to live in a different way. We will continue to share with you. We will continue to open this debate. It's a very special day, very special for the Garifuna people, because we're being recognized internationally. This just struggle that we are taking on as the Garifuna people. Thank you very much, compañeros, compañeras. Thank you, Miriam, and congratulations for the Letelier Muffet Prize. As you know, Letelier and Muffet were killed by terrorists in Washington during Augusto Pinochet's rule. Chile, Colombia, and Honduras are the countries that send more troops to the School of the Americas, which is a institute of hemispheric cooperation. It's a new name for this organization to continue this organization that hassles people. We're going to continue now with Karen Pérez, who is an attorney. Thank you very much, Karen. I would like to hear your opinions, your experiences to the struggle of the communities struggling for their rights, facing this problem of extractivism uh, in the communities. Thank you very much. This is a great time for this invitation because thanks to these medium, we can shorten our distances and we can bring to the international community a vision together, which is always a Pandora's box. And it's important to bring attention to what's happening in our territories, especially our territories, ethnic territories, that have been failed by the neoliberal system, which we uh, have to live with this extractivist exercise, which is causing the extinction to many communities and people. And this is an exercise that has been imposed upon us by the Colombian state. My name is Karen Joanna Tafur Pérez, as my companion introduced me. We are part of a group that are victims of the armed conflict in Colombia. We have got together to work as intermediaries to bring our uh, voice and our truth to whoever needs to hear it, to get some guarantees in the name of our community. Is the community is constructing peace in the territories. CONPAZCOL. We go from the length and width of the Colombian territory, and we very grateful again that to be invited to this space because it is very important for it to be known that the situation in the northern Caribbean, Colombian area. I think our friend Miriam has done a great x-ray of talking about this area, not just this area, but of all of the people in Abayala who suffer under extractivism and the neoliberal system. I will use this sketch that she made, this x-ray. I want to say that exactly uh, these assault that we are feeling our people, not just because of the arms conflict, but added to that is the problem with the environment and the nation states that won't recognize the cultural rights, the culture, the rights of the environment to people, not just to the Colombian people, but also to the people who live in the fields. Uh, the Colombian government has takes part in the neoliberal system. I'm talking now about the extractivism of mining and energy. And we should point out in this work session, in this roundtable, that in North Georgia, North Colombia, we have a state that has a earth that's very rich in carbon, and that's why they have been transnational companies have aimed their vision. They're very powerful, and they don't recognize the rights, the diverse rights of the people of the fields, um, and this creates We must comment on this neoliberal system. We find that in this neoliberal system, they will use any reason to uh, dismantle any uh, social state. It does not look at any uh, rights of people, of communities, because the game is played with the rights of whoever has extractive rights to these territories. The state that I'm talking about has a very multinational community, indigenous, black communities, and farm communities, but none of them have escaped. I'm sorry, we have a problem with the interpreter. We're going to take a minute, and we don't want to miss what you're saying. We're going to continue with somebody who has a better sound, but thank you very much. No, thank you. Yes. Those of us from the coast, we speak very quickly. So, um, but definitely, these actions do not benefit the communities. This exercise allows us to get a pretty large and important amount of money, but it doesn't reach the community. So we need to reflect upon this. For us, we have been analyzing, taking a close look at how this kind of activity benefits our territories. And they always say that we are against development, but we're not against development. We have to think about how development is a benefit for the communities. And if we start looking at a sketch about development, we have to see that first, it is wrong to name this development because there is no development when you are throwing people off of their land. There are a lot of communities that were did not born with the skills of being miners. But how can you call it development when there is a rupture in the um, material society? How can you call it development when there is damage to the earth? When there is damage to the atmosphere, to when there is damage that has to do with the fauna and fauna. How can you call it development when they're being delegitimizing the state of law, where they do not have free consulting of the community, free information of the community? How can they call it development when there is a community that does not have public services, something that improves the benefits of life? how can you call it development? All of this extractionism that has led to the armed conflict in Colombia. A lot of the multinationals that have are in the Colombian territory have been questioned strongly for the because of their financing groups that are at the edge of law that have participated in the displacement, forced displacement, in forced disappearance, in homicides of people who are protected, not just men, but women, children, boys and girls. You cannot call this development. How can you call development when the state abandons a group, when they are called to guarantee the economic, environmental, and cultural rights to these ethnic communities and these communities of campesinos? It, we know that from the administrative to the judicial, it is important to think about, because definitely the states are not providing the guarantees of, in no manner, to the uh, people or the communities with this so-called development. We must reflect on this because we understand that how can they how can these large corporations that come to our territories not only to extract and exploit the minerals, but also to to plant monocultural plants that kill the earth? How can you call this development when these corporations come throwing out the people to be able to have control over the territory and to be able to um, do whatever kind of activity they want? We really need to think about this, because the same thing that Miriam was just saying is what's happening in Honduras. Really, not only Colombia has the same problem, but many countries in Abayala. And this is where we need to think also, where is the responsibility really of the human rights that individuals are using, but the International Rights Commission does not recognize that we do have that are including these individuals, because these individual people who are controlling the extractivism of the neoliberal system, and they have been sheltered by a free trade agreement. We must be very careful at looking at this, because if we can't find guarantees in these types of treaties, we will never find guarantees inside of the national territories. So then, as a community, we go, we knock on doors at different international groups, like embassies, like groups of human rights, and they listen, but our voices are not replicated as far as concrete actions, because of the dominant position of the corporations. I think Miriam will agree with me. Our communities have the capacity to resist. We have the capacity to have action and to demand that our rights are guaranteed. But what do we do against these corporations that have all of the power over the administrative and judicial system? Here in Colombia, there is something, there is a saying that says, give me the proof and I will give you the rights. And if we do not give the judges the rights, how can they rule on our rights? They will never give us our rights, which this means that those who do develop, those who show the proofs will be to all of these corporations that have the money to pay for their experts, to their technical teams, in order to uh, back up what they want to do. And what we need to do is think about ourselves as in a unity too. We are the people who are in charge of a home. We are not just looking at territories, but we're looking at the whole thing as a home. We need to see how we can support our brother and sister countries that for many centuries before have been fighting, including since the colonization. So I will leave this now, and we will talk more about this in particular. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. I was thinking the word development that is used in our countries are coming to our countries to give us development, to give us jobs, to supposedly make our countries grow. It's a fallacy, it's a lie. I was reading this morning that in 2020, multimillionaires have increased their wealth to 61% in this pandemic. The rich are richer still. So in the second panel, Lulu is saying, why? Why this militarization? Why these coups? Why do we allow Ivan Duque to continue to rule, or Juan Hernandez in Honduras? Why this complicity? And we think that there are these very powerful economic interests, and in this uh, in this vein, I would like for um, Miriam Miranda to tell us about how the Inter-American human rights is hiding behind this disappearance of these four compañeros. Why does the government of Honduras not want to do their their due diligence? I would like to talk about some of the things that our companion was saying, Karen was saying earlier. We have to understand that the problem in our countries is that the system of justice does not work, and we're always going to be behind the business people and the corporations, because the justice system are employees of these companies, because they've taken over the Latin America and of course the world, not just Latin America. And this is the principal reason why we have to take the few the small amount of territories that are left. Every day there are more arguments, more struggles in our territories, and it's why our struggles, there is not a response by the states. Let's look at the example of Ecuador. What happened, the sentence against Shell. Shell actually sued the country of Ecuador. And this is very grave, because today these corporations, these industries, are the ones that dominate the planet. And this is what we have to be very clear upon, because, as you were saying, it's incredible that in this full-blown pandemic, there are more rich people, the owners of the technology, of the pharmaceutical corporations, the people who have fuels, they're richer, because this pandemic has been designed, and it's very clear that they're looking for a response, a way to reduce the population, because they're saying that there's too many people and that the resources are not enough for everyone. Look, we must simplify what they're saying because the truth is, because as there are such few, this, this is why I started saying that the greatest failure for the future of humanities was happening in my country. If we do not reduce the emissions on this planet, all humans will be gone. I think it's important for us to understand that because the planet will regenerate, and the fight and the resistance of communities, as for example, the sentences against Honduras, is very important. Your question is very important. You know why? Because the states and the governments, because they do not um, reply to the requests of the people, they are sentencing. Um, Look, there's a sentence over the Garifuna people. There have been 70 in Colombia, 70 sentenced in Nicaragua. There's a lot of sentences, but the state will not carry them out. Why? Because the state are employees practically of the international investments of these groups. This very dangerous group, for example, those who are creating the special development zones, which we know these are neo-fascists, millionaires who are trying to create different areas of development to generate what? To generate territorial areas. It's like returning to a monarchy because they don't even want the state to be responsible for or anything to do with its territories. Today, Honduras, the whole area has been given to these corporations. So, and the struggle, the ancestral struggle of the Garifuna people, and this is why the state, the government has been condemned because they don't want to respect, they don't want to give the Garifuna people their rights or even the right of consultation. The people have a right to be asked. And the other sentence is that the state needs to respect the community title of the area of their country. And 5 years ago, this sentence was issued, and the government does not want to follow through with this. They are delaying, they are sending information, unsubstantiated information. Sometimes we don't even want to respond to them because they're laughing at the Garifuna people and the intelligence of our people. Look, something that's very important too is that they're not following through with the sentence. It's a very important message that the state is sending because the people that want to take over our territories, the ones that are fighting, who every day want our resources of our beaches, of our forests, the state is giving them a message that says you can continue to do whatever you want. And that's very dangerous because they continue to put in danger the Garifuna community. And this is what they're doing by not following through and this message of not wanting to continue or to carry out the orders of the court. What is very important, the Inter-American Court, the representative of the government said that we don't have, the Garifunas don't have any rights because we arrived, because we are not originals of here. But we were living here before the Republic 2.5 um, centuries ago. We've been living here in Honduras. So we have rights because of everything that has been the construction of this country from our country as Garifuna people. The disappearance of our young people has to do with the control of the territories of the criminal groups, the mafias that are interested in the lands and the resources in Triunfo de la Cruz area, which is a very rich area, and there's a lot of biodiversity there, It is a place where there's a lot of natural resources, and it is also a bed where there's a lot of criminal groups that want to control the entrance to these rivers, between the rivers and the sea. And our brothers, especially our compañeros Centeno, had dared, along with somebody else, to remove these people who are deforesting the area, because these are areas that have a number of diversity, turtles and other animals. And he and a couple of other people came and they displaced these folks that were working in our territories, and that's when they were threatened. We went to Tegucigalpa to launch a complaint in 2019. Several demands that we made, but as always happens, they were deactivated. They were not looked after. And this is a logic. It's a logic of listening to the people from foreign countries and not to your own people. Honduras is a country that has, as I was saying, a lot of crises, and one of them is the lack of jobs. We have a culture right now where people go out to the street and say, "What am I going to do um, to put myself down in order to bring something to my country, to my household?" People, this is 70% of the population that goes out empty-handed, trying to bring something home to be able to feed or to take care of their families. And this is ridiculous because people should have the right. The government should give us the ability to be able to um, feed ourselves. But now the government is using this as an excuse to say that this development areas will generate employment. And the governments know that this is not going to happen, that they won't even have these control. It's going to be territories in the hands of other corporations, and they're going to be a fiscal paradise, a place that is a country that it is controlled by narco traffickers. Imagine what it will mean to have two or three people that be controlling these territories. This is a situation that is very dangerous, very grave for our people, for our country. But above all, we want to say that the the subject of displacement, because we're saying that the government of Honduras has a genocidal plan against the Garifuna people. Ever since the government started pushing policies, like, for example, approving these laws, there was a law approved recently to the criminal code that said 2 to 10 people can be held, um, arrested. Why? Because we're going to have election, and it's a way to repress the people. If they find you in the street, they'll say that they're causing vandalism, that they're causing chaos, and we know that the communication mediums, massive mainstream media, which are at the control of the state, those are the ones that have a fundamental role in creating fear and terror. And this is another thing that we need to work on, is bringing information so people are not afraid. So these are several things that we need to bring to the table. Yes, and also how to use the media to see what we're doing, to analyze what we're doing. The Garifuna people, for example, here the Mapuche people, where the corporations have devastated their territories. They've devastated. They have killed trees that are hundreds of years old in order to plant pine trees palm oil trees. These are tragedies that we have suffered as well. I would like to ask Karen to start getting towards the close of the peace agreements. I understand there were several peace agreements that were trying to resolve the economic conflict, which is the cause of our people who need to have a better life. Karen? Oh, thank you. Yes, precisely. We are in November. We are about to celebrate 5 years of the signing in November of the peace treaty. But really, this is not closing the gaps in economic gaps. These accords were designed in a way that we're supposed to provide guarantees in many dimensions, a rural reform, that also a political participation, also looking for the end of the conflict, not just laying down of the weapons, but also guarantees for leaders, for defenders of human rights, and also of those people who voluntarily said no to war. I say we are leaving our weapons down. These are ex-combatants I'm talking about. Also, the subject of the problems with illegal planting. We must understand that the stigmatization of the coca leaf has been said it is illegal, but for the populations, this is nutritious for them, and we have determined that these are being called illegal crops. But also the peace treaty talked about the victims, the truth, the reparations, the non-repetition, and the guarantees for those of us who have been victims of the armed conflict. And to this agreement, there have been two axes that transverse. These two things that I just mentioned that transverse the ethnic problem, but also the problem of gender, of women. So these points, more than closing the vast openings that exist, that we need to have a rights for people. This is what they were promised. But notwithstanding the previous, the challenge has been high because the government likes wanting to do something with this problems with the gender of people, and this has increased after the signature of the treaty, but that there has now been a number of dead and disappeared social leaders, community leaders, environmental leaders, and brothers and sisters from ethnic brothers and sisters. So on a general balance, we would say that the numbers that they are presenting internationally is not really the ones that you do a balance of this peace accord, and we can say that we are getting any closer to a peace that's lasting and real. Because it's not just about putting down weapons, but it's about guaranteeing what will allow us all to live in conditions that are dignified and that we would have our basic needs met and we have some form of food needs, our rights be respected, our constitutional rights be respected, So it's if we look at the final balance after the signature of the peace accords, it what we thought was going to change, it has actually meant that the conflict has increased, not just um, weapons, but also with the environment. And this is something that has not been followed as when they signed the agreements. Thank you, Karen. And last year we presented a report talking about the role of the United States in the Colombian conflict. And of course, the signing of the peace accord was something that gave hope to the world, but it's gone very slow. Colombia is a place where there's most assassinations of ex-combatants, of people who defend um, nature's rights, the environmental rights, and a number of things that were not done. A lot of agreements that were not met. And to close now, I would like to ask, what can we do in order to continue to visualizing what's happening? Um, Miriam. This question is always asked of me, and there's a great responsibility in the North to do something because we here in the South, we're doing what we have to do, but I feel that in the North, very little is done. In the North, we still have the same consumer patterns. In the North, they can keep consuming more fuel. They continue to live at a level of consumption that affects the whole planet. I think there's a very difficult situation um, because we're doing what we have to do as organizations and groups in the South, but those of you in the North have to also to do your own work because we are at the edge. Everything that we live now in the exploitation, the savage exploitation of human of natural rights is so that people in the north can live comfortably so they can consume everything they want. Right now there's a crisis about avocados because avocados are eaten in the United States, in Europe, and they're grown in Michoacan, Mexico, and that is creating an unprecedented situation because all of that has been deforested in order to produce avocados that are eaten in the north and in Europe. I'm sorry to just point this out, but it's a reality. It's a situation where we need to make a strong effort because the youth of the United States have no idea where the tomato that they're eating, where does it come from? What is the environmental cost of all this fruit and vegetables that they eat? And sometimes when I go to the United States, and I am horrified to see how they throw away food when there is so much hunger. There's a very strong work that we need to do in the North. I see the posters of solidarity, marches for solidarity, but we're in a different level now. We have to assume responsibility in the North, also the organized groups, and they have to spread the word that there is a crisis and that we need to pay attention to how we are constructing and how we're consuming in the North. That would be my recommendation because here we keep fighting strong, putting our lives on the lines. I think this is very important. Thank you very much. I want to reiterate my gratitude for inviting me to share with you. Thank you very much, Miriam. Karen? I also want to say truly that what we need to do is that the resistant communities recuperate their trust. And the recuperation of the trust It's very concrete forms of action in every territory. I'm going to speak concretely that we are with a group, community consejo, and they have been attacked by three uh, carbon corporations from the nationals, these transnationals. For more than 3 decades in this territory, they have been in this territory and they have been able to get what they want. This whole attack is added to the war problems because this people were known as collective victims of the armed conflict. So it's very concrete for these communities that need to get together and um, allow that these people be able to nurture themselves, to have technicians, to have information that might be allow them to show how the situation, social situation, how the problem with bridges, with atmosphere, and that with this we could sow a precedent when a country in its rightful struggle gets a win that allows the people who are watching, and not just behind, but in front or in horizontal terms, they can also get strength from that and say, if they could achieve this, we can too. Unfortunately, we have not been able to get ahead because of all of the reasons why I said that these people don't have the economic wherewithal to get the technicians that are needed, that require a lot of money for this. So I think one of a concrete action would be to get a fund so that these emblematic problems of these nations could also be able to fight in a very balanced way. I'm not hearing Karen Brigitte. Are you hearing? I think she froze. I think the signal froze. It might be her connection. Well, without a doubt, our friend Adolfo Pérez always says something that makes a lot of sense. Latin America, our people have lived what Eduardo Galeano said, the open veins of Latin America. We have suffered the that capitalistic countries are dependent on us. Very rich, very beautiful countries. The neoliberal model, which is damaging not just our lives, but also uh, their resources, our natural resources that should be saved for future generations, which are fundamentally for the human race to live. But this, and they are predators that are predating on our world because for money, for capitalism. But Karen, we want to thank you for what you shared with us. We want to thank Miriam Miranda as well. And we will continue following the struggle of the OFRANEH, of CONPAZCOL, and everybody so that we might be able to have a good outcome for our people we must denounce what's happening. Brigitte, I'll give you the following, the last words. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Miriam. And thank you very much for reminding us that those of us in the North, we have to make a lot of changes into the way we live so that we can solve this planetary crisis.
So thank you, Pablo, and thank you to Karen and to Miriam for sharing with us, and especially for reminding us how much work we have to do in the global North to enact very profound and systemic changes to confront the climate disaster that's impending. And also, as we kind of close this out and reflect on the work that we have to do, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been 3 back-to-back workshops with lots of speakers and lots of information. And we will be following up with emails with some of the information, the action items that have been shared today, as well as the recordings of the videos. And before we go, I just want to invite everybody to join us on November 21st for the virtual vigil. Since we, again, did not feel it was appropriate to gather in person this year due to the pandemic, we will be once again having the vigil virtually. And so if you'd mark your calendars to join us on the 21st at 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central, 12:30 Mountain, and 11:30 Pacific to remember and hold up those whose lives have been taken by US and other US promoted violence, by state violence throughout the hemisphere. So thank you very much.